Welcome back to another podcast with your host, Miriam at Raise Your Vibes. Today's podcast is quite a serious one that we can relate to on many levels. It's about dealing with narcissistic parents or narcissistic, toxic people that are in our lives, and sometimes we don't really realise, we have these people in our lives, what we can do about it, what we can't do about it, what we perhaps can do to move forward or to remove ourselves from these people, if that's at all possible. All of us will have grown up with a different type of family zone, different type of environment, different type of family structure. Some of us have been adopted, some of us have, our biological parents, some of us have close relationships with our siblings. All of us have various different types of family dynamics, and in 2021 that's changed certainly. We have so many different factors now influencing all these types of family structures coming in. But one of the things that we perhaps don't realise, and we sort of realise it until we get older, is that we're often surrounded by a narcissistic parent or family member, and they can make our life very troublesome, very troublesome. You'll have heard my podcast before about narcissistic partners, for example, but dealing with the parent is even more difficult because it's harder, to remove yourself from that particular scenario, because you're linked by blood, you're linked by biology, by your DNA, and often, you can't leave. Some people do manage to cut ties, some people do distance themselves successfully, and some of us sadly can't. We're stuck in that sort of situation and scenario for various reasons. When you're growing up, all of our parents, all of our family members have ways of installing discipline, installing life into us, teaching us right from wrong, teaching us about morals, teaching us about how we should conduct ourselves in the wider world, in the wider community. And often that person for us is our go-to person. They're our guru, they're our life coach, they're our person for moral guidance, they're our moral compass. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right type of person to guide us. Through my years of teaching and various other roles that I've talked about, there's often been scenarios when I was safeguarding officer and child protection officer, where I had to make the decision to help remove certain parents from their child. I've been sat in court cases where the child has been removed, and the amount of paperwork, the amount of evidence against that parent sometimes is unbelievable, and they still want their child back, which we can understand why, But when we're dealing with someone who's narcissistic, abusive and toxic, and it's a parent, it's often very hard to disfragment that sort of tie and detangle it and sort of make that young person understand, or even older person understand, that the person that they're dealing with is a narcissist and they're toxic. They might have given birth to us, they might have, raised us, but that doesn't necessarily make them the right person for us to be around. Okay? We are growing, we are becoming one, we are turning into an adult or a young teen or whatever it is that we are, But the situation is that we often are dealing with someone who's very negative for us, and we don't often see it. Because we are connected to them through the bloodstream, through our DNA, like I said, it could be your mother, your father, your brother, uncle, whoever the relationship is with you and them, it's very hard to walk away from. And they make it harder, As you grow into sort of like adulthood, sometimes that can be made easier when, we have different jobs, we're financially more secure, we're in a position where we're able to move away and, make those decisions where we have to cut those ties with that person. That can sometimes be easily done in those sort of situations. But often than not, sometimes, there are still people left in that household who can't run away, who can't escape, who can't move on. They're sort of attached to that person for various reasons, whether it's financial security or the individual has just made it very hard. There's that codependency between them, and they've made it very hard and very toxic to escape. It could be that we financially are unable to rent our own place, or perhaps the law doesn't allow us to, live by ourselves. Each person will be listening to this from different countries, I'm aware of that, and each law will be different, But what's upsetting sometimes is that you can be working with someone, and you can be trying to support them, you can try to help them, you're trying to encourage them to grow and to gain strength. Because when a narcissistic parent is involved, unfortunately, they attack our inner core, they attack our inner being, in our inner light. And unfortunately, instead of encouraging us and supporting us and helping us to grow, they're this toxic gas, this toxic fumes that's just surrounding us all the time, and we can't escape. We're dependent on them for whatever reason, whether it's a mental, codependency, physical, spiritual, religious, financial. It might be that, we rely upon them to keep us safe in the sense that we've got somewhere to sleep, somewhere where we've been fed, perhaps nurtured in those respects. Perhaps they've taken away all aspects from us where we can be, dependent, but instead we're codependent, and that toxicity comes in. Sometimes, we have our own friendship circles, and we try really hard to lean on those friendships. We try hard to gain some strength and some support, and we do end up, trying to be a stronger individual. We work on our issues, we work on the negative aspects for us, we try to gain strength, we try to gain clarity. But unfortunately, this toxic energy will always keep trying to claw back, will always keep trying to gain control back of us. And that's not easy either, to step away from that. The more that person sees you, happy and dependent, not codependent anymore, dependent. Perhaps you've got really good friendship where other friendships have failed, that can be a huge source of negativity for that narcissistic, toxic parent or relative. They'll do anything they can to cut those ties with that person, showing you the negative aspects, constantly sort of putting in, not love bombing, but the opposite, hate bombing, constantly feeding the hate, constantly feeding your insecurities, saying, that person's going to leave you, that person's going to betray you, that person's not the friend that you think they are, that person will not honour their friendship, that person will betray you when you need them the most, they're not going to be there, and so on, And unfortunately, when we're in that negative circle, negative cycle, we keep believing it. For a while we are having this self-esteem that's grown, we feel ourselves rooting for ourselves, we feel ourselves being happier, we feel in a loving place, in a caring place, because that friendship, that started has shown us boundaries, it's shown us kindness, it's shown us this sort of reciprocation between two people that care about each other. It's shown us forgiveness, it's shown us kindness, which is most important, and perhaps kindness without any expectations, without boundaries, in the sense of, there's no control. The other person just loves us for us, they care about us genuinely, they don't want anything untoward, they're not after anything, they just want our friendship, simple. But the toxic person doesn't see it like that. When we're in that situation, we have a really lovely friend, caring friend. We've stepped away from that toxic, negative person. We've built some good roots, we've built some good foundations. And perhaps, that toxic parent or relative or whoever it is that's in your life sees us content, sees us happy, sees us glowing perhaps, sees that we've got someone that cares about us unconditionally. And that friendship at times is going to be tested. There's going to be things that happen with the toxic person. They will do things to ensure that friendship doesn't persist, it doesn't continue, Sometimes this happens with the adult or the person trying very hard to show, their friendship. They want also to be part of that inner group. And sometimes the other individual may be appeasing the other person. They might show some friendship, they might allow them to be part of that group, because when parents are involved or a relative is involved, sometimes you show that other respect as an adult and allow them into that circle. And there are times when you have to say no as well. It's choosing the boundaries sort of wisely, in these sort of situations. Then there are times as well where, you and the friend may go for some time without seeing each other because life happens. You work in your different jobs, you might be at college, university, whatever the scenario is. There are times when you are away. Life happens, doesn't it? Okay, but that friendship continues. The roots are there, they're strong roots. But things happen, like I said. Unfortunately, these toxic individuals, these narcissists, will do what they can to sever those ties between you and that person. And unfortunately, the individual concerned, that tends to be the relative, will often have, some form of anxiety. They can't choose the friend sometimes. They can't choose the friendship that they want to save. And often they are pushed into a very, very deep corner where they're told or they see that, from my point of view, the best thing for me to do is to end this friendship. Sometimes it happens where a fight is sort of like instigated on purpose, okay? And if you detach yourself as the person that's trying to help this person, you'll see what I mean. Okay, this might have happened to you already. Some of you might have experienced it. And in other cases, you sort of sit back and maybe all of a sudden that friendship has just ended, okay? From the individual who desperately needs you as a friend, to be honest, And as much as we want to support that person, as much as we might want to cling to that friendship because we value it, we do. We genuinely value it. We genuinely see that there are deep issues in that person's life. And, we are always going to stay loyal to them and their secrets and whatever foundations we've grown. But unfortunately, we have to look after our own mental health too, We can't be fighting other people's battles, whether that's on a spiritual level or a mental level, There are times when we have to always look after our own mental health. And there are times when, individuals really do show their true selves, okay? So they might come from a place of attacking you. They might come from a place of being really rude and nasty and facetious, And there are times when you have to look at those particular aspects when that friendship ends and think, is this really the person that was my friend, or is it coming from the narcissist, and the toxic person? 9 times out of 10, or 10 times out of 10 I should say, it is from the narcissist and it is from the toxic person. And as much as you would love to support that person and make them realise what they're doing, make them realise their actions, make them understand that what they're doing is not actually based on their decision, but they've been pushed into a corner, Unfortunately, we're not in a position to do that. You can stand there, you can talk to them, you could scream at them, you can make them realise, you want to shake them, physically, and say, hey, this is not you, this is the other person who's trying to, damage the core of your life. They don't want you to be happy, they don't want you to have friendships that are loving and caring. If anything, they're trying to destroy you. But you know what? The best lesson in life is experience. That's the best teacher. And sometimes you have to stand back and you have to walk away and you have to let that person stand by their decision. As hurtful as it might be to the other person, as hurtful as it might be to you. We have to stand back, we have to let them walk that path. And it can be very hurtful because we know that the toxic energy around them, unfortunately, is going to make them drown. And we also know that maybe at some point that friend might come back and ask for help. And we have to be in that situation further down the line where we either honour that friendship or we say, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. Because, it can get quite destructive, it can be quite vicious, and it can be something that keeps leading you to pain and misery, because this becomes then a pattern of behaviour, which I've talked about before. So sometimes, sadly and unfortunately, the best thing to do is walk away from situations like this. Honour and respect their decision. Honour and respect the friendship and the time that you had. And close the door. Easier said than done, I know. That comes with time, it comes with experience. And, you're going to feel this sadness, you're going to feel this grief because that friendship has gone, that love has gone. And all you wanted to do was spend time with that friend and glow and, honour that friendship and see it grow for what it was, But unfortunately, that toxic person's energy has consumed your friend. And no matter how much you try to show them the light and show them the other side, there's nothing you can do about it. Because unfortunately, they're in this dark place and they've decided to cut you out. And you have to honour that. As hard as it is, you have to honour that and walk away. Over time, you might decide to, write letters, not necessarily send them. You might send text messages, but not send them. You might just store them on your phone. There's so many modern ways now of, journaling, for example. There's modern ways of going through your grief, because this friendship is going to cause grief. The end of it is going to cause grief to you. It's going to cause sorrow because that person has deep issues that sadly you're not there with anymore. You can't help them anymore. And it's time for you to stand back. If you're someone that's religious or spiritual, whatever, you might just pray for that person. You might pray for their spirit. You might pray for their soul. You might just wish them the best of luck. And these situations are uncomfortable, by the way. These are not easy scenarios to be facing. But like I said, there has to be a situation where you have to also look after your mental health and your spirituality, your essence, your being, the vibes around you. You don't want that toxicity, You've tried your best to help this person and unfortunately they don't want you anymore. Now, what does the toxic person gain from all of these things? Well, they're in this power dynamic, aren't they? They are in control, and it's their ego, it's their control, they're doing the gaslighting. They're also reducing this person to nothing, the person that they're humiliating and destroying. And sadly, they're caught up in this cycle of pain and abuse, mental abuse, spiritual abuse, physical abuse perhaps, and they have anxiety. They can't control it. They're not in a position to let go. But the narcissist clearly knows exactly what they're doing. This is a huge power dynamic, and it does show you their sort of allegiance as well. They want to know that the person that they're controlling is just loyal to them, and whatever they click, when they click their fingers, that's what happens. You do as I say. You follow my instructions. And it's hard. It must be very, very hard for that person because the anxiety just gets deeper. Sometimes, we can help our friends with scenarios like this, with toxic relatives. Like I said, sometimes we're able to leave, but at huge prices. For example, not seeing a family member anymore, not having any connections with siblings, not having connections with family ties. And these are the things that make us, don't they? They make us feel whole. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to leave those scenarios, to leave those situations, because these are close family members. For some of us, we go through this whole detachment process when we've left. We don't have any communication with that person anymore. We solely detach and we move forward and we sort of reinvent ourselves, rejuvenate ourselves, and we allow ourselves to grow. Doesn't mean that pain isn't there, because of course it is. Of course it is. Those are successful people that manage to do that. And they have really cool friends, really cool, supportive network, loving network. So there is another aspect to that. But sadly, there are times when there are people that just don't have that infrastructure. They've had it temporarily, but then it's crashed and it's burnt because the narcissist and the toxic person has made sure that they've cut all roots, they've cut all ties, so that person is on their own. It's sad, isn't it? As you reflect on these things, it's very sad to see someone that you care about and that you love and that you've nourished and grown and spent quality time with is unfortunately sucked back in. But like I said, these are things that they have to learn. These are things that they have to go through, and we as human beings have to respect that and grow from that ourselves. You can help yourself by grounding yourself, praying for that person, like I said, remembering the good times. Don't be sad about it. Of course you're going to feel a bit of grievance, and of course you're going to feel sadness for that individual. That's natural. That shows that you cared about that friendship and that love that you had between you. But you also have to learn to let go, and you have to learn to let go and surrender. And that's the bit that we sometimes struggle with. That's the bit that sometimes we find really hard to allow that person to be, because we understand they're being manipulated. We're understanding that unfortunately they're in a lot of pain and they can't get out, but that's part of their journey. There's not always going to be clear answers, guys. There's not going to always be a remedy that works for one to another, because each narcissistic, toxic parental relationship is not always easy. Sometimes there's been cases where, years later, person's gone back into that sort of realm, and they've tried to make ways, they've tried to bond, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it's not. Like I said, experience is your best teacher. Wherever you are on your journey, if you're listening into this, I wish you nothing but peace and love and harmony, because these particular episodes are not easy to go through or to recover from or to even exist in. If you're someone that has that sort of friendship with someone, keep staying strong for them, keep giving them love and keep giving them blessings and keep helping and supporting them. And if they do cut ties, it is what it is, and you have to make that decision whether you stay and you support them or whether you let go. Sending your blessings, sending your healings on your different journeys with toxicity. May we all come out of it nurtured, may we all come out of it grown, and may we all come out of it healed. Take care, guys. Look after each other.